Today, how to overcome helicopter parenting. What do you do when you are hovering or when your child becomes anxious because previously you have been a hoverer? That's what we're talking about today on the Happy Families podcast. Welcome, Real Parenting Solutions, every day on Australia's most downloaded parenting podcast. We are Justin and Kylie Coulson, and every Tuesday on the podcast we answer your tricky questions. You can send them to us via happyfamilies.com.au. Just go to the podcast page, scroll down to where it says talk to us and leave us your message, just like Amy has done in Melbourne.
Hi, Justin and Kylie. I'm a self-diagnosed helicopter parent. I want to be more autonomy supportive and I'm getting better, but now I have a 9-year-old helicopter daughter. We don't live in a neighbourhood where I can just let them outside. We're off a main road and there are known predators approaching kids around us. How do I undo this anxiety I've passed on and get my daughter doing riskier activities, but also keep her safe? Thanks in advance.
I just saw your eyes light up. I'm guessing you want to geek out on some academics, don't you?
Oh, a little bit. I mean, my eyes light up because I think tricky questions are great. But aside from academics, there was one thought that popped into my head that I think is really critical here. We talk all the time about the importance of risky play. The research evidence is clear that it's good for kids. It helps them to overcome anxiety, which it sounds like Amy might be starting to deal with her 9-year-old. The central thing that I want to emphasize is that context is everything. So we say take risks, we say encourage the kids to do things that are risky, but context is everything. If you live on a main road or there are known predators who approach children near where you are, then finding alternative ways for your children to take risks other than riding a bike down to the park probably matter a lot. And the age of your child matters a lot as well.
Yeah, so that all makes sense. But if I am a particularly anxious parent, how do I distinguish between what's risky and what's hazardous? Because I guess in my mind, if I'm that person, everything feels hazardous as opposed to risky.
Right. And hazard/danger and risk, they feel like the same word, especially if you're a parent who's a little bit anxious and really worried and you're in an area where you know that there are lots and lots of dangers and hazards. How do they differ from risk? So when we look very carefully, and this is my geeky bit, I'm so sorry, but this is really important. It's really relevant. I can see how excited you are about it. I'm so sorry. The academic literature consistently distinguishes between risk and hazard or danger. And it happens like this. A risk is a situation where a child can recognize and evaluate the level of risk. The child has the developmental capability of saying, that's a big, busy road, or there are a lot of people around here that I don't like the look of, and I'm only 9. I think I'm safer being with my parents. So that is risk. It's when the child can decide, they have a sense of agency around this. I'm going to decide whether I will try to climb over the rocks and get to the bridge on the other side. I'm going to decide whether I'm going to run the gauntlet and do this thing at school or whether I'm not. Okay, that's the critical thing here.
Well, if you just take it a step back and we look at the crossing the road thing. Yeah. It's hazardous for a 5-year-old to attempt to cross a busy road on their own.
Yeah, maybe even a 6 or a 7-year-old, depending on the size of the road and all that stuff.
But we could consider it possibly a risky activity for a 9-year-old who has a much better perception of the dangers with cars and distance and all of those things.
Great. So a hazard's basically a source of harm where the child is looking and it's not obvious. They don't realise how quote-unquote dangerous it is. Going to the beach is a perfect example of this as well, right? So if you go to the beach and your child doesn't understand how the ocean works, it is dangerous because there are rips and sweeps and currents. But if your child has been going to nippers for years and they understand what a rip looks like and they understand how big the shore is and they know where the waves are and where the flags are and they know those things, then they get to assess the degree to which they feel comfortable taking a risk of going for a swim in a particular place. It just comes down to knowledge and the ability to identify what's going on. I guess the other critical thing that I would highlight, and I already touched on this, is just the importance of child agency. So the child has to be able to make their own decision about whether or not they'll participate. And we've got so much research from so many countries now that shows that risky play increases physical activity, decreases sedentary behaviour, improves learning, improves mental and physical health. It's good socially. It's good for bringing anxiety down. There's not a single metric really that risky play doesn't bring benefits for. But it's risky play, not dangerous play.
So if I am a particularly anxious parent and I am recognising that I guess my anxiety is actually limiting my child's progress and development. How do I get past that? Because that's the biggest challenge. It's actually not my child.
It's me.
It's me.
Yeah, that's right. And you are aware of the risks and you're just not satisfied that your child can either A, navigate them, or B, you're terrified that something will happen. Remember last Thursday we talked about trusting in a child's organismic development, their desire to learn and grow. Actually, I've just realised you're looking at me blankly because that's the one I did because you weren't available. Did you listen to that one that you weren't in?
I don't think so.
It was the one with Renee Landry from McGill University.
I definitely did.
Talking about how we need to trust in children's organismic development, and the more that we trust that they have a desire to grow and learn and master and develop, the more likely it is that they'll figure things out and thrive. You don't remember that one?
I can't remember if I didn't listen to it. You're giving me a hard time.
All right. So
in public.
After the break, I'm going to outline how to answer your question, and then I know that you're championing the bit because this is your specialty. You're actually really good at coming up with the practical ideas for how to do this. So that's what we'll do in just a sec. All right, Kylie, you've said, how do we get over our own stuff? How do we get over our own anxiety about letting the children do things that are risky because we're nervous about what might happen, or we just don't trust that they're going to be able to figure it out on their own? The first response that I'm going to give is just not very helpful, but it's really important to say you've actually got to trust that the kids are going to navigate this. Like, the children will learn how to not go too close to the edge, not climb the tree too high, not go swimming where the water's too deep, not climb up or down that rock face if we give them the opportunities from a young age to start to navigate risk. Okay, so the second thing that I'm going to say is this. When we talk about need support or autonomy support, as Amy has called it, first of all, you can buy my book, The Parenting Revolution. It will step you through everything here. And it's one of those books where you want to read it, study it, listen to it on audio, like go through it a couple of times. But critically important is this idea of structure. Structure helps people to become competent. So structure means understanding the rules, the guidelines, the frameworks, the systems, the formula, the boundaries. So if we can be really effective at helping our children to understand the structure that's necessary to be competent, that means that when they're in a situation where they need to address and assess risk, they're going to do it far better. I think the perfect example is the one that I shared a minute ago with the kids doing nippers at the local surf lifesaving club. You don't just go and let your kids go for a swim in the ocean. That's dangerous. That's hazardous. But if you can spend time helping them to understand the structure, the rules, the way that oceans work, remembering, of course, that oceans can be unpredictable, but the more you know the pattern, the more you know how it works, the safer you're going to be. So I'd be saying, spend some time with your child, helping them to understand why these are the rules and how the rules work so that they can navigate the road safely or the park safely. For what it's worth, I don't think Amy should be letting her 9-year-old go to the park on her own based on the things that she's told us about the area that they're living in. But there are other things that you can do. And that's where I'm really going to turn it to you because this is your specialty. This is the thing that you talk about so well.
I think one of the first things that I would actually encourage Amy to do is to actually sit down with her daughter and be a bit vulnerable. Explain how she's feeling as a parent and how in feeling that way, there are things that she's done as a parent that she recognizes has actually rubbed off on her daughter, has stopped her from being able to be a little bit spontaneous and take risks on her own because mum's been scared. I think that's a really important part of the process.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Although you've got to make sure that you don't terrify your child as you explain what you're nervous and anxious about. That can, for some kids, make them increasingly anxious.
I don't think it's necessarily about explaining what she's nervous about. I think it's just acknowledging that as a mum, she loves her child so much and wants desperately to keep her safe. But because she's allowed her anxiety to rule the decisions that she makes, it has stopped her from having experiences that she could have otherwise had.
Much more helpful.
But practical ideas based on what we know about Amy and where they're living, like you said, it's not going to be as easy as just letting her to go down to the park and meet a friend or maybe even just walk to the corner store. But there are things that she can do. So I thought of what would it look like if mum drives down to the shops and instead of her getting out and grabbing the milk, she actually sends her child in to go and pick up some milk and then pay for it at the checkout. How does that make her feel? Maybe if that's too much, maybe they're going and doing the grocery shopping and mum has her own shopping list and so does her daughter. And so they're kind of in the same space shopping together, but they're shopping separate.
Brilliant. Love it.
Maybe they're going to buy a birthday present for one of her daughter's friends, and they go to a department store like Big W or Targets or somewhere like that, and the daughter gets to go off to the toy section and pick her own present for her friend while mum's in the clothing or homeware section. Daughter knows where she is. Yep. She can find her way back, but she's doing it on her own. Maybe she just goes and pays for things at the counter while mum walks out of the store and waits for her outside the door. Maybe she gets to go order her own lunch while mum's sitting at the table waiting for her daughter to come back.
And all those feel appropriate for a 9-year-old. If you're not comfortable with that, what's the smallest part that you're comfortable with, and allow her to do that. And as your confidence grows and hers grows, it gets better and better. And if there's friends who can join her, that increases your sense of security and safety, because 2 kids are going to be safer than 1.
And if all of that feels really way too big right now, based on where Amy and her daughter are at, maybe it's looking at things that she can do on her own at home. We don't know how anxious her child has become, so it might be that she actually doesn't like being in a different room. And so working towards giving her opportunities to do tasks in a different room to mum could be helpful. Maybe she takes more responsibility in the kitchen. Maybe she gets to make her own breakfast or make breakfast for the family. Maybe she learns how to make a meal, and once a week she does that. There are so many different ways that you can engage and give a 9-year-old responsibility without putting her into a hazardous situation.
All right, let's wrap this up. A couple of things that are definitely worth highlighting. The likelihood of a child in Australia being kidnapped is infinitesimally small.
Yeah.
But the stats don't matter if that happens to you. So we're not going to get caught up on that. Probably similar odds to winning the lottery. It's probably even less likely. And usually when it does happen, it's somebody who's known to the family. It's usually a separation situation and that kind of thing. But if we want our kids to be safe, or at least to be able to make decisions about what level of risk they want to take, they need to be put in situations where they can take risks. The data shows, from an evolutionary perspective, children's risky play is going to serve as a, what's the word I'm looking for, Kylie? Like an you're less likely to have phobia, antiphobic mechanism, where the kids, because they're playing and because they're taking those risks, they experience a reduction in anxiety of the situations that used to be dangerous when the child was younger, but now they're old enough to assess it, they're not so concerned. And the academic consensus is really clear. The distinction isn't between risky and dangerous play, but between beneficial risks that children can assess and manage versus dangers and hazards that are hidden and therefore beyond their developmental capacity to recognise. So the goal is keeping children as safe as necessary rather than as safe as possible. Amy, we really hope that that's useful info as you navigate the reformed helicopter behaviours that are such a struggle. Thanks so much for being in touch. If you've got a tricky question for us about family or relationships or the kids or well-being or screens or discipline or any of those things, submit those tricky questions via our super simple system at happyfamilies.com.au. Just scroll down to podcasts, click the record button and start talking. Or you can send us a voice note to podcasts@happyfamilies.com.au. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. More information and more resources to make your family happier is available at happyfamilies.com.au.